Oh my God. The needle got stuck in the fabric, the machine got bound up, and now my embroidery will not line up again. Or the power got knocked off. I took the hoop off to check everything, and now I'm not sure how to get my pattern lined back up again. These are some common situations that can come when you're trying to realign an embroidery design in the hoop on your machine. Let's go over some ideas to show you how you can get your embroidery design lined back up like a pro. Whenever you're doing a design on your 4x4 Brother machine, now this is mainly for the Brother because I've experienced this with the SE425, the SE400, and the PE500. Your embroidery is on the machine and your needle gets jammed for whatever reason, whether it be nesting under the bottom or maybe the thread got caught up at the top or the tension was set wrong. There's any number of reasons that would cause your thread to bind up in the machine and stop. Now, some machines will give an error message and say, that the fail safe has kicked in on the machine and you need to fix it or clear the jam, whatever the case may be. When the thread and the bobbin gets jammed up so much that you can barely take this hoop off and the machine has locked itself up, one of the tricks that I've learned to use, and I may have mentioned this before, is to get just a simple craft knife. Now, these craft knives are found at Dollar Tree, and if I'm not mistaken, they come in a 3-pack. Or they are definitely found at any arts and crafts store or even Walmart for that case. And what I found is when you slide this all the way out, it creates a thin blade that's long enough to reach up under the embroidery hoop with that little bit of space that you may have, and you wiggle it up under there to get to where the thread is to cut it loose from the bobbin. So this comes in really handy for that. And then of course we put it back in place and put it up. But once you get that thread untangled, then what? You take your hoop off and then you would find that there's a mess going on here. Usually you will find that the top thread is wrapped around the bobbin, or it's just jammed up in the bottom of the machine some kind of way. So you would have to remove the plate here. Once you take this off, then you go through the process of taking the bobbin out. I would suggest dusting it out, making sure there are no loose threads. Look for any loose threads. Pull them out with a pair of tweezers before attempting to reuse the machine. Then definitely double check your top threading and make sure that your thread is going through all the proper channels. So definitely whenever my machine gets jammed up like that, I rethread it to make sure that up top is threaded like it's supposed to, because there are times where while you're embroidering, it may come off of this hook that goes up and down, and that will cause problems down here as well. So always take this loose when it gets jammed up. Check down here, rethread your bobbin down here. Check up here, rethread your threads up here. Now this tutorial isn't about getting jammed up, but I wanted to mention that because obviously if you're concerned about getting your project realigned, there's something that has happened that will cause your project to become out of line. So in the event that that's what has happened, then I want to be sure that you understand that's really important to go back through and rethread everything, make sure that everything is clear so that we don't repeat the problem. Once we get all of that resituated, before you actually go to put this back on the machine and start stitching again, what I would suggest is to check your alignment at this point. Why would I say that? Well, because if you put this back on the machine and you go ahead and start the machine back up, 9 times out of 10, because this was bogged down from the thread and the bobbin being locked in place, and your embroidery arm was still trying to embroider for a few stitches until jammed up pretty much. So it will knock this out of alignment, your embroidery arm. All right. You can go ahead and try to start your embroidery back where it was, and sometimes it will still be in place. But for those few times where it's not in the right place and now your embroidery project is out of line, it makes you miserable because you've ruined a project when all you had to do was check the alignment to begin with before you even started embroidering. It's a very simple thing to do, and I'll show you now how you can double check to make sure that your project is realigned where it's supposed to be. Now at this point, we're going to pretend that this was knocked out of line for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. Because as a matter of fact, what we could do is turn the machine off, erasing this pattern out and get it right back in line where it's supposed to be. And we'll do that as an example, but what I'm going to do is explain first how to check to get your project back in line. One of the first things you would do is make a note of where your embroidery project stopped. So one thing's for certain, you really have to know your pattern or have been watching it embroider out to know where in the project it's supposed to be. Also, you can generally check your embroidery screen to see, what part of the pattern, like what color stop it's on. That could prove to be helpful as well. But what you want to do is, once you determine where your last stop is, which in this instance it's right here, one of the most helpful things is don't unhoop your project. Leave your project in the hoop, because this part isn't what's wrong. It's the way the machine is set. So if your arm is knocked out of place, and when you put this on and you determine that this isn't lining up where it's supposed to be, one of the easiest ways to get this back in line, first of all, is to turn the machine off. Yes, I know turning the machine off will take the design out of the Brother 4x4 machine. It'll wipe the memory. That's fine. That's not an issue, because all you have to do is put the design back in the machine. Now this one is a stock design, so it's already in the machine anyway. But by turning the machine off, it will allow the arm to reset. So once we turn it off, you know what happens when it turns back on. Every time we turn our machine on, it says the carriage of the embroidery unit will move. So let's say okay. And look, now it's out of line. It's not where it's supposed to be because it finished our embroidery back here. So how do we get this? Now that we've turned it off, how do we know where to go back to where it was? Well, for me, I know that it was all the way over here. So I'm going to go back on the machine. And we'll zoom out and move this so that you can see. We'll go back on the machine, and I'm going to find this butterfly and reload it. So in your instance, you will reload whatever design it was. And here's the butterfly. So we're going to load it. I did not make any changes to this butterfly. So you need to make sure that you write down prior to doing your embroidery if you make any changes to your design in the machine. Okay, because if you've made changes to a design in Seward Pro, well, you're just going to bring the design right back over the way you did the first time without any changes. But if you made changes in the machine, like say for instance you move the design up a little bit or down a little bit, then you want to make a note of that. But say you didn't say you didn't make note of that, that's a horse of a different color, but it's still going to be handled just about the same way as we're going to do now. So now that I have it loaded, I'm going to go to adjust. All right, and then what I'm going to do is go here to this middle one with the needle. So this is our needle option. It's only one color stop, so I'm not going to be changing these color stops up here, but I am going to use this here because what I want to do is advance to the spot where the embroidery stopped. Well, how am I supposed to know where the embroidery stopped? So what I'll do, I will be pressing this button here, the plus sign, and if I need to back up a few stitches, I'm going to press this reverse sign. So I'm going to turn this back to the butterfly so that you can see it. And I'm going to advance through the steps, the needle steps. So I'm pressing that button and holding it down. And the longer I hold it down, the faster it's going to advance through the design. So I know all of this on this side of the butterfly has been stitched already. So we're going to fast forward through all of this until it gets to the other side of the butterfly. And I also know that this part in here was stitched before this part here. So I'm going to let it fast forward through all of that and see now it's on that side of the butterfly. So as it speeds through, now that it's over here in this area, I'm going to stop and see if it's going side to side, which we know this is a satin stitch. I'm going to see if it's going side to side to let me know if it's on this part or if it's on that part. Another way you can tell without just pressing the button, because you can just press the button and see that, it's going back and forth. So we know it's not on this part and I can fast forward it. But another way to tell where your embroidery is to lower the needle. Turn the wheel on the side of the embroidery machine, turn it forward, and look, the needle is barely touching right here. So that's telling me that this is the stitch that it's at right now. So it's right here. That's not on this satin stitch, and that's not over here where we need it to be. So essentially what you're going to do is fast forward through these steps until you get to over here, and when you lower the needle, it should land right in this area here. Now whenever a project has been interrupted like that, you're going to have a few stray stitches such as this one in the way. So what you can do is just pull that out of the way and back it up about 4 or 5 stitches back, so that as it starts to embroider again, it'll cover this, lock that back into place, and then stitch forward. All right, so let's go ahead. The needle is down, so this is telling me where it's at. So we're gonna roll the wheel back and put the needle back up, and we're gonna press the plus sign on the needle again to let it keep going through, because we know it's not to the satin stitch yet, the outline. So now it's doing the outline, right? Because it's going up the side. And notice now we're close to where we need to be, which is here. So that's why I stopped it back there, because it was in the fast forward through the whole pattern mode, and I didn't want it to skip this. But if it did, all I had to do was hit the minus needle button and it will back it up. So let's push it forward, and notice, see, it's going side to side for the satin stitches, and I held it down a little bit longer so it'll give that little jump. So I'm not really sure if it's right here where I need it to be. So what did I say we can do to determine exactly where the machine has stopped? Do you remember? What we need to do is turn the hand wheel on the side of the machine, the right side of the machine. You turn it forward and put the needle down, barely touching the embroidery design, and you'll see it's almost there. It's almost there. As a matter of fact, technically I could let the embroidery design just pick back up right here, because it's gonna just go back over these few stitches and you'll barely be able to tell that it had to restart right there. But as it is, I'm just gonna scoot it forward just a couple of more stitches, 8 stitches, and roll the hand wheel forward again, put it down, and look, it is right there where it stopped. the first time. It's right there. So if I go ahead and put my needle back up, press my green button, and it's gonna fuss at me because I, first of all, don't have the presser foot down. So we're gonna put the presser foot down, and then we'll go ahead and press the green button, and look, it's picking right back up where it was, and it's finishing out the embroidery design. It was simple, a very easy thing to do to get it back to where it's supposed to be and get your embroidery back in place. Nothing is out of line. Everything is stitching back to where it's supposed to be. Before you even start back stitching, after you've had a thread jam, or before you start back stitching after, say, the power was turned off and your machine has lost the design that you were using before, the most important thing you can do is do not unhoop your project. Do not unhoop your project, because your project was stopped right in the place where it was to begin with. So if you unhoop this, that's going to be what's difficult to realign that thing, because you took it out of the hoop. Now, if you did take it out of the hoop, there could be a possibility to be able to get it right back into place where it was. And a lot of that is going to have to do with using this other part of the menu that we were just in over here. And instead of your thread and your needle, what you're going to do is lay out, and you'll be using this to nudge the needle and the whole hoop to get it in the place where you've rehooped it, to hopefully get that back in line where you want it to be. So the thing is, most important than anything, not unhooping your project, okay? Because that's really going to make your life difficult. So that's pretty much how I realign a project once the power's off, or once it gets bound in the machine. And if it's bound in the machine, I promise you, cutting that machine off, cutting it back on, letting this embroidery arm reseat itself, a lot of times it will fix the problem. And all you have to do is just fast forward back to where you were on the machine. Now, this is the 4x4 in getting your project realigned. How do you get the project realigned on the PE600? That works just about the same way. So let's go over there and give that a look. The fun thing about aligning on this 655 is that it can almost be too easy to align on this thing. Now, using the fast frames, learning how to use the fast frames, I should say, is really what taught me the importance of aligning over here. Because with these fast frames, the machine is not programmed to know the size of these little frames that you're putting on here, little or big. So the machine thinks that it has this super extra big hoop on here because that's the bracket that's on the machine. But that's not what's on here. It's not this, it's this little bitty hoop. So in order to make sure that your design doesn't hit the size of the hoop, you have to know how to align. All right. So let's go in here, and what I've done is I pulled up a fleur-de-lis design. All right. So I'm going to pull the camera back just a smidge so that you can see all of this. So we have this design, and as I mentioned, the machine thinks I have the biggest hoop on. So it's in the center, but when I look at this, I don't know that it's in the center. How will I be able to tell where this is? So I'm going to say edit in and let this design be there. Now, fortunately for my machine, I have a light. Yes, it's a cheat, I know. However, even if I didn't have the light, it's easy to line it up, because you line this up the exact same way you do over on the little bitty machine. You find your needle, you can either pull this down and it will show you where your needle is going to go, and that tells you about where it is. Or you can turn the hand wheel in the back of the machine as well. Either way, it'll let you know where your needle is going to be positioned on this machine. Now, with the machine, however, there is a alignment section here, and the alignment section is this color squiggly line, and it shows this is the middle, this is the farthest back that this design will go, this is the farthest front that this design will go, and this is the front corner that design will fit, that's the side, and so on and so forth. Yes, you could use this one here where it draws out the actual square of where it's gonna go. And that's useful if that's what you're trying to go for. But if you want to line up your pattern, that's not going to help you. So we want to be sure that the exact middle of this, because going to the right, we see that it's within the frame. Going to the left, we see that it's within the frame. But I want it to be a little bit further back. So say for instance, we're going to take this piece of fabric. I'm going to mark just the spot, just somewhere on here. So that's where I want this to go. This is where I want the design to be on this fabric. So I'm going to put it on the machine. Now I could cheat and put it right there, but that's not where the pocket is going to be. The pocket is actually going to be a little bit higher than that. So this is not in the right place. If you can see the laser light, if you can't, then we'll pull this down and see that my dot is way back here. The needle's way up there. So we want to center it on that purple dot. So we know the center is already marked here on the screen. So I'm going to we know that set at the center. So I'm going to move it back to try and line it up with that purple dot. So we move it back with this button here. And if it's moving too fast, slow it down right there. If that's still too fast, you can push that button right there. And it nudges along. It's really funny to hear it do that. So I'm right in the vicinity of that spot, but it's still not directly on that purple dot. So let's move it over. And look at that. Bam, right there on top of it. You couldn't get any more perfect than that. But that's with the laser light. How do we check with this? We come down with the needle and see just how close it is to that purple dot. And that's how you can figure out where your alignment is. Now, of course, if I had have drawn a line across, or if I had the dot here and the dot here to make sure that I'm in line this way, well, that's different. You'll have to make sure that it's aligned by the way you hoop your fabric on the fast frame. But for the most part, if you're trying to find that central dot, this is how you find it. You use these buttons here to get it moved to where you want it to be. And then once it's in the right place, we need to make sure that, because this isn't up here where it was, this is moved over some and it's farther back. So we need to make sure it's not going to hit the back of this frame back here, nor the sides of the frame right here. And we moved it back, so we know it's not going to hit the front part of this frame. So I can feel the side here and I can feel the side there. And I even like to, you know, use my fingernail lightly to crease it there on the edge of the frame. And now all we have to do is press the far button to the right, and notice it's not even, it's not right there at that crease. And to be 100% sure, if you don't have the laser light, just bring that foot down and you'll see how far it is away from the edge of that frame to keep from bending your needle. And likewise, we go all the way to the other side and we have good clearance from over there. And you don't have to worry about the needle hitting the side there. The exact same situation, if the power is knocked out, you want to do not unhoop or take your fabric off of the hoop. You can take the hoop off the machine anytime, but just don't take your fabric or your project off of this hoop. That way, when you put it back on, it's pretty simple to get it realigned back the way it was, because you don't have to worry about if it's realigned this way. You just have to get it back to that point where your embroidery stopped. As far as aligning on the big machine or even the little machine, the alignment is pretty much handled the exact same way. The only difference is your buttons, you have a few more option buttons as far as how to align something over here versus over there. It's just the plus and the minus for the most part. But even then, you still do have direction buttons where you can go up, down, or side to side to get to the point where you want to be. But ultimately, to be sure that you can realign a project, do not, whether it's the big machine or the 4x4 machine, do not take it off of the hoop. Do not take your project off or out of the hoop, because that is going to be your saving grace. There you have it. Doing a realignment can be a pretty straightforward process. The most important thing I can tell you is be sure to do not take your project out of the hoop or off of the hoop if you're using fast frames. Also, to realign on the smaller Brother 4x4 machine, when that arm gets knocked out of whack, you'll have to turn that machine off and turn it right back on to reseat the arm. Now that's if you put your project back on the machine, and when you lower the needle, if it's way off from where it was supposed to be, that's a really good indication to let you know that you're going to have to reset that arm so that you can get your project back in the right place before you even start stitching again. I hope you found the video helpful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up. That helps me know that I've done my job in explaining it correctly. Also, please subscribe. We have videos out on Tuesdays that are tutorials, Thursdays which feature a live discussion at 7 p.m. on a topic that surrounds either embroidery, sewing, or crafts. And Sunday evenings at 7 p.m. is a live video as well, and we do a back and forth discussion topic. You ask questions and I try my best to provide the answers. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch our videos. We definitely want you to have happy embroidering while you're in your studio. To help you with that, we have a new coffee mug that says Happy Embroidering available for sale on our website. You can find it at www.thebabiesbooty.com. I'll also leave a link in the description below. It's available for a limited time and in limited quantities, so you want to be sure to get yours today. So on that note, we definitely want to wish you all happy embroidering. Click here to subscribe to our channel. Click here to view other videos in our tutorial playlist. And click here for the next video that you should find helpful. Thank you.